who's here, feel free to ask a question, and then we'll take a break at about 6:05, and we'll reassess from there. So great, okay, so we're gonna start off, we're gonna just go down the line, so if you can say your name and say not only what district you're running for, but also what towns, just in case anyone isn't as familiar with the legislative district number.
Everybody.
Because I know when I was first starting out, people were throwing out LD this, position this, and I had no idea. So to make sure everyone's on the same page, you can mention the towns you're representing, and then share a little bit about yourself, your history, and then a little bit about why you're running. And you feel free to take 2 to 3 minutes. All right, so I'm gonna start with you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for doing this, and I appreciate the audience being out there. You guys are part of the small percentage that is engaged in the process. And actually, one of the reasons I'm running is to inspire other people to get involved in the process. We actually have a lot more power than we think. Anyway, my name is Michelle Darnell. I'm running for state rep in the 48th. That's Bellevue, Redmond, and Kirkland. And I'm a mom of 4. I've got actually 3 millennial kids. Well, they're not kids anymore, they're adults. How I got here? Well, in about 2008, 2009 recession, I became aware of bank fraud, foreclosures. I spent about 6 months researching that, and what I found out was pretty appalling. And I've actually witnessed and gone into some of the homes that were foreclosed on, and it was as if the people had walked out with the shoes on their feet. I saw the movie The Inside Job, I read The Big Short, and what I came to be aware of is that basically 40% of middle class wealth was taken in one fell swoop. So there's something in me that's kind of a bit of a fighter, and I wanted to fight for justice, so I thought, well, where am I going to do this? I'm going to do it probably in the courts. That's where the justice is, right? So I set about becoming a paralegal to support attorneys that were fighting the good fight, so to speak. But my experience in the court system has been pretty much that he who has no money has no justice. So that made me realize that I wanted to get a little more involved. I first testified in 2011 on the foreclosure issue, and I slowly kind of worked my way up, and to the point that in 2014 I ran for office. I ran for office because of this issue, but this issue is a contributing factor to a lot of other issues. We've had over 600,000 foreclosures in Washington state, and we have pretty much homeless spilling out onto our streets, and we have empty houses throughout the state. That is a big concern of mine. We're talking about some of the other, we're going to probably talk tonight about education, the need for funding for education. We have mental health issues, our funds for mental health services and so on and so forth. And in my mind, the loss of basically 40% of middle class wealth is a significant contributing factor to these issues. So I'm a libertarian. I believe in smaller government. Woo. I believe in lower taxes, lower regulation. We've had 30 decades of progressive politics in the state. I think that there is unequal footing. We have too big to fail corporations who are working with government. They have the power to sort of create a regulatory and a taxation environment that's putting burden on small businesses and families. Back to the foreclosure issue, you young people, it affects you insofar as you probably watched your family during that period of time possibly lose a lot of what they had worked their whole lives for. And therefore, student debt. Mom and dad, by the time it came for you to go to school, they no longer had that home or that nest egg in order to put you through school. So it's a contributing factor to that. So anyway, I'm running again, and I just want to sort of be the voice of common sense and reason. I think that there's enough people in Olympia right now talking about funding. I'd like to come at things from a different perspective, particularly with education. I'm sure some of you have heard about the McCleary issue. We need to come up with education. We actually spend $14,000 federal, state, and local per child per year, and 1 in 4 kids doesn't graduate. I think that in addition to talking about funding, it's time to talk about reforming education as well. So my website, michelleforthehouse.com, and thank you so much, and I will pass it off to. Good evening. My name is Rhonda Metcalf. I'm running for a state representative for the 39th Legislative District. The 39th is probably one of the largest districts. We have King County, Snohomish County, and Skagit County all on the east side. And that would include Monroe, Arlington, some of North Marysville, Concrete, Gold Bar, Skykomish, Granite Falls, I'm forgetting one. Well, there's more. Oh, let's see, Cedar Woolley, that's the other big city. I almost forgot Cedar. So why am I running? I am running, my background, I have a Master's of Science in Education with a specialization in community counseling. So basically I'm a social worker and a therapist, and I am a member of the Soxhawtl Indian tribe, which is in Darrington, and I have been an elected tribal leader on and off for about 8 years, and it's through that time where I've sat on a lot of state issues. And I will tell you that, no disrespect to any legislator, but I think our state is making some really big mistakes, and that's the privatization. We privatize child welfare. This state has gone to a system where if your child goes into the system, your rights are terminated within 6 months if you don't get your child out of that system. That's wrong. We should be building families and reunifying. The other thing that they're privatizing is mental health, which has been privatized for some time, but now they've added chemical dependency to that, and now they've put that responsibility with the same mental health institutions that have been failing the people for a long time. It's a system that doesn't work, and what we need to do is build capacity. We need the state to take back their responsibility and provide services. All the money that we spend on these privatized agencies are monies that we could go to services, chemical dependency, mental health services, child welfare to reunify our parents. Other issues that I support are minimum wage. In 2008, I, as a tribal leader, took a resolution to tribal council to increase the minimum wage, and we went from $8.75 an hour to $15 an hour. It was a really big jump in one movement, but we've been there. It hasn't killed us. We're not a gaming tribe, so $15 minimum wage would not hurt any business. I do not believe so, because my own tribe has done that. Protecting our natural resources is a very big issue and a big portion of my platform. My district is very rural, and so spawning grounds for the salmon are there. Water issues are very big in northeast Skagit and Snohomish counties. So those are some of the things that have brought me to want to be in Olympia. I am also a veteran. I served in the Army from 1979 to 1988. And I will tell you how I got into politics, actually. I was a student for my undergraduate degree at the University of Nebraska at Kearney, and I thought, well, I'm going to do everything I would have done if I would have been a traditional student. So I was an elected senator on student government for 5.5 years while I was there getting both of my degrees. I do believe that if you want to make a change, then get involved. I encourage young people to start early to get involved, because it is us that makes the difference. We can't sit around and complain, and when our legislators are not making the right choices, we need to get involved, whether it's community service, or county, city, whatever it is, we need to get involved, even if it's just reading to a child. So that's me.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Romero Valderrama. I'm the Deputy Mayor of the City of Sammamish, and I'm running for State Representative in the 45th Legislative District. And following up on what you said, the 45th thinks it's the most important district in the state. I am also a father of 4, 3 millennials, and one still in the Lake Washington School District. I'm a graduate of the United States Military Academy, master's at George Washington University, 25 years in international public sector, private sector running global initiatives. I recently was reelected in November with 83% of the vote in Sammamish with wide bipartisan support, and am also on not only the chair of public safety, vice chair for the regional public safety law and justice, and on the board of Eastside Fire and Rescue. I am an advisor to the Lake Washington School District STEM Startup Program. I'm also the chair of the International Services for the Rotary, and on a number of nonprofits and organizations. It's interesting how I got involved into politics. It was inadvertent, as often happens. It's when something directly impacts you in your neighborhood. In our case, it was dealing with the Parkway in Sammamish. That didn't make sense to me. I then started to gather my neighbors together who felt that they weren't being heard, and we then went to the city. That started to grow. We started to gather neighborhoods together. The coalition ended up with 5,000 residents opposing that Parkway project that was not going to help traffic or beautification. From there, I helped found Citizens for Sammamish, which is a grassroots organization pulling together its technical advisory and a town hall process in Sammamish. People then said, hey, you should help us get a voice at the city council. So I ran for the city council 5 years ago. I mentioned my re-election. And then because of the stuff that we were doing in Sammamish, making sure that people were being heard, making sure that we had the right to initiative, making sure that we understood that problems are not D issues, R issues, I issues, or environmental or property rights, but they're common sense issues that affect us every day, and looking for win-win solutions. I then had citizens in other cities asking if I could advocate for them. My moniker is the proven advocate who gets results, and that's what I'm hoping to do at the 45th as well. Thank you.
Hi, and good evening. My name is Michael Appleby. I'm running for the state representative position number 2 in the 41st Legislative District. This is home for me. We cover Bellevue, right here on Bellevue College campus. Go up to the plateau. I cover more of Sammamish than Romero does, he told me. We split Sammamish, but Mercer Island and a sliver of Renton and Newcastle. So I decided to run for state representative kind of at the last minute. I was sitting in traffic on 405 one too many times, looking at the tolling, thinking how unfair it is. The folks over at StopTollingForOhio.org had gathered petition signatures upwards of almost 40,000. The Senate acted on it, and they passed the reform. It wasn't perfect, but in my opinion, they listened. When that bill went over to the House, and Judy Cliburn, who is the head of the Transportation Committee, and she is the representative that I'm running against, she ignored that bill, and in my opinion, she ignored the voters. So I decided to run, but it was more than that. When I looked and saw that there was no competition, when I dug in a little bit deeper and I saw the issues that the current legislator was voting on in her voting record relative to what the district wanted and how they had voted on different initiatives and how she'd ignored them, I felt it was my duty to step up and to run. And since I did start to run, it's been an incredible learning experience, and I can tell you that I've met some wonderful people, I've met very interesting people. It's incredible to take a deeper dive. But that's why I decided to run. I wanted to make a difference, and I think there are things that we do well. I think there are a lot of things that I don't agree with, and there are things I can do better. I'll cover that in a moment. But when it comes down to what qualifies me to run for state representative, I recently retired. I had a 20-year corporate career, and it was good. And during that time period, there were a lot of demands, and it didn't enable me to participate as much as I would have liked to in community events, community boards, and different things like that. But nonetheless, I'm serving now by wanting to run. I've done different service trips. We've participated with many different charitable organizations. One of my favorite is Hope Link, and also Child Haven. What I particularly love about Child Haven and why I love the community college system as well as the Bellevue College, the whole system, is that we need to break the cycle of childhood abuse early on. And when you look at things that can make a difference, part of what I'd like to do is champion that cause in addition to my real three keys, which are eliminating tolling on 405, fully funding education, and keeping a tax structure that makes Washington the envy of the country, which is why we have this booming growth. But I'm sorry, I skipped over one other part, my background. Prior to 20 years in the corporate world, I did 11 years as a machinist and a mechanic, and then I went back to school and obtained a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Economics. For a long time, I didn't really put that on my LinkedIn profile. I was a little embarrassed, and a friend of mine said, Michael, you graduated high school, you weren't ready for college, you went to work. Toward the end of your tenure, at the end of the 80s, you saw the writing on the wall, you went back to school part-time, and then you went back to school full-time in your early 30s, and you got a degree. Wow, that's pretty good. I have union pension coming. That's incredible. I like unions. However, there's a fine line to where they can help and where they don't help. And as I look at fully funding education, one of my primary reasons for wanting to run, in addition to making our roads better, in education, 1 in 4 students don't graduate in the state of Washington. In my district, we have an extremely high graduation rate. How can we export what we're doing well in this district and bring it around the state? As I've said many times, our educational system, our schools, these schools are not factories. Kids are not widgets that they're all the same and they get turned out the same. And teachers aren't factory workers. They need to be paid and they need to be recognized because not everyone is the same. We need choice, and I want to have a seat at the table for that. When it comes to transportation, there is no credible plan on the books where I've looked for relieving any of this traffic congestion. Yes, we need more buses. A train, we'll decide that in a few weeks. But the reality is this area was first populated and everyone had a car. We need more buses, park and rides, and things like that, things that can help immediately. And lastly, on taxes, I'd like a seat at the table to make sure that we don't have a state income tax or a capital gains tax. So on that note, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and hopefully I didn't go 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm State Representative Patty Cooter from the 48th Legislative District. That includes Bellevue, Redmond, Kirkland, and the Points communities. That's Medina, Clyde Hill, Yarrow Point, and Hunts Point. And I was appointed last fall to fill the rest of Ross Hunter's term. I went through my first session and found that it was surprising on a number of levels. The first and foremost, which I hope you'll find a pleasant surprise, is that the House passes most of its legislation out on a bipartisan basis. And I found that personally to be true because my 3 bills that passed were on a very strong bipartisan basis. In fact, one was 97-0. I found that there was a lot of collegiality in the House, and that people were, most of the people I met are serious about the job, but don't take themselves too seriously, and I think that's really a good formula. The Senate's a little different. The legislation that comes out of the Senate is on an extremely partisan basis, and that tends to be where, in my opinion, good legislation goes to die. So, you know, and it's the reality of a divided government. My background before I got to the legislature is that I'm a trial attorney. I've been practicing law for 30 years. I started out as a prosecutor and a city attorney, drafting legislation for the cities, representing them in multi-party complex litigation, going up from the Superior Court to the appellate courts to the Supreme Court. I got to school because my parents were adamant that each one of us, I'm one of 9, were going to go to school. My dad was on the GI Bill, and that's how he got to go to college and get his law degree. My mom graduated from high school, but both of them had an extreme love for education, valued it incredibly, and encouraged us not only to work hard in the school where we were at, but to achieve as far as we could go. And we all took different paths, but 7 of the 9 ended up going on to university, and the other 2 went through trade schools. And each one of us today are gainfully employed and, as my dad would say, productive members of society. So I really credit them with giving me a love for education, which is why I got into politics in the first place. Is that when the McCleary decision came down and I saw that there was, it seemed to me to be some dragging of feet in terms of funding education in the state, I decided to throw my hat in the ring. I actually looked at running in 2014 and did not get in the race at that time. And when the appointment opportunity came up, I threw my hat in the ring, and 30 days later I was holding my hand up and swearing to uphold the Constitution of the state of Washington, only to find the moment after that I was in contempt of court for the first time in my life. And if any of you are following the McCleary decision, they had another decision that was released today that continues with the fines. And did not feel that the plan that we passed last session, which was not something that I joyfully voted for, I really had wanted to go much farther, and the House legislation that was proposed was much bolder, but it was a compromise. When you have divided government, that's what's going to happen, and that was the compromise that came out. It was, at the time, what I heard a Republican colleague of mine say, it was the best that anyone could hope for. So, you know, this is an urgent matter. I believe very strongly in public education, and that we have not fulfilled our duty in fully funding it. And teacher salary, which is the last component of the McCleary decision, is what's up next session, and estimates range from $3 to $4 billion, and that money is going to have to come from somewhere, and we're not going to cut our way out of this hole. And no matter what size government you have, if you don't have good people in government, you're not going to have good government. And you need people who are going to be thoughtful and making good decisions about how we're going to go about solving this problem, so that we don't have this problem again 2 years from now, 3 years from now. You can't just solve the problem for the moment. You really need to be looking, you need to be forward thinking about these things. And that's one of the things that I think I bring to the table, is that in all of my work as a trial attorney, and also just as a mother, and having been a volunteer in many different areas, mainly in the schools, you know, you really have to be thinking outside the box. And in fact, I like to say you have to think as if there is no box. And I think that when you bring a can-do spirit to the table, when you bring a problem-solving attitude to the table, and that we can do this, and we should do this, and we have to do this, you know, there's no other option. Failure is not an option. I think that tends to bring, you know, more people down from the stratosphere and into the realm of what I call reality. It's been a wonderful experience for me so far, and I look forward to going back to Olympia in the fall and finishing at least this part of the job. There's much more to be done. You know, education is why I got involved, but I have a lot of passions. The environment, affordable housing, transportation, mental health issues, women reproductive rights, all of those are very important to me, and I've worked on those issues in some way, shape, or form over my entire lifetime. Children's and women's issues have been particularly close to my heart. My volunteer work has been, you know, helping in homeless shelters, temporary crisis shelters, and domestic violence shelters, things like that, where, you know, you really see the effects of you know, destructive lifestyles and what can happen, and what we can do as a community to help people turn their lives around. And, you know, I do believe that we're all in this together, and together we will move forward, and that's really the path that I want to take, is to move our state forward. We can be a leader in education, and we are leading in some ways. We have really good quality schools. The 48th Legislative District has some of the top performing schools in the state, and we have 0 charter schools. And there's a reason for that. You know, we have choice within our public school system right now. The charter school bill that was passed, I voted against, because In my analysis, I view that it's unconstitutional, and it's already up on being challenged legally again in the courts, and I think the Supreme Court will once again find that to be an unconstitutional bill. When you have in your state's constitution a mandate to the legislature that they shall provide for a system of general and uniform public schools, by definition, charter schools fall outside the uniformity clause. So irrespective of how you fund them, I think you're going to find the Supreme Court is going to strike it down again. The way that you get charter schools in our state constitutionally is if you amend the Constitution. Putting that aside for a moment, I think we need to be looking at our public schools first, fully funding them, and taking what's working in the 48th and the 41st, apparently, and replicating that, because every student in our state has, I think, the right to quality education, and we have the ability to do that. We just have to have the political will. Thank you.
Last one. This part is almost over. My name is Darcy Berner. I'm a candidate running for the open position 2 seat in the 5th Legislative District. The 5th is the outskirts of Duval, Carnation, Falls City, Snoqualmie, North Bend, Issaquah, Maple Valley, Black Diamond, and the outskirts of Enumclaw. So it is basically the easternmost edge of King County from the northern part down to the southern part. We are in the foothills of the mountains. I, in my day job, run a small union manufacturing business in downtown Carnation that I started with my son. We are conveniently right next door to the Starbucks in Carnation, which is a very small town. So the ability to get coffee and tea at will is very helpful for my employees. I had run previously in 2006 and in 2008 for the United States Congress against Dave Reichert. Came close enough both times we didn't actually know for a week who had won in either year, which is excruciatingly close. From 2009 to 2011 was in Washington, D.C., working with the Congressional Progressive Caucus to try to build a more responsive, better Congress that did a more effective job of representing the people of this country. The process of starting my company was actually sort of funny. My son and I co-own the company. Henry is, at the moment, 13. When he was 10 and a 4th grader at Falls City Elementary, which is in Falls City, they do a project at the end of the year, which is a trading post. All the kids have to make something at home and bring it in to trade for beads that the kids have earned throughout the year. It's a great opportunity for relatively young people to learn a little bit about how economies work and trade works. And so Henry came home one day, and he is very dyslexic. He's bright, wonderful, and very dyslexic, so he had been struggling in school. He came home and he said, "Mom, I need to make something for this trading post day." And being a relatively normal mother, I said, "Would you like to make cookies or cupcakes?" And he looked at me and he said, "Mom, the baked goods market is going to be totally oversaturated. We need to make something durable." And I had button machines from my previous campaigns, so he asked if we could make some buttons for him to take in for the trading post day. So we made about 100 buttons that said things like "I heart Minecraft," which when you're 10, very popular button, Falls City Elementary, and things like that. So he took them in for trading post day, and he learned a little bit about the economy, and he came back with something like half of all the beads in the entire school. He was very pleased with himself, and he said, "Wow, that was amazing. How do I make real money doing this?" And I'm thinking, what a great learning opportunity for him. So we spent that summer doing farmers markets in the region. We did the farmers market in Sammamish, we did the farmers market in Redmond, the one in Issaquah, we went up to Lake Stevens, we went up to, so we did, most of the farmers markets around here will let a kid have a booth to sell something that they've made for between $5 and $15, right? So Henry did farmers markets all summer, the summer he was 10. And at the end of the summer, he had grossed about $1,000, which when you are 10 is an enormous amount of money. So he said, "Oh, so farmers market season is over. How do we sell buttons when it's not farmers market season?" I said, "Well, you can go try selling to local businesses, or we can try selling online. So he went and he pitched a bunch of local businesses, and he got some really good ideas. Like one of the Sammamish businesses called Pacific Bike and Ski said, well, we don't really need buttons, but we'd really like to have badge reels with our logo on them. And he was like, badge reels, that's a good idea. But he didn't get any of the local businesses to buy because he was 10. And so he said, well, how do we sell online? And I helped him set up an account on Amazon.com. We set the account up in February of 2014, and in calendar year 2014, he sold $250,000 worth of buttons on Amazon.com, $250,000, and dragged most of his relatives into the process of trying to keep up with the demand. In 2015, he sold a little more than $500,000 worth of product on Amazon. The company grew to the point that it had taken over the basement, the garage, part of the dining room, the upstairs hallway. I couldn't get around anymore, so I made him move the company out. We rented 3,000 square feet of space in downtown Carnation, right next door to the Starbucks, and hired some additional people. Earlier this year, we unionized. We are members of the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades because we wanted to make sure that all of our workers were as well treated as we could possibly make them. Earlier this year, Henry and I flew to Bentonville, Arkansas, home of the largest retailer in the world, Walmart. And we pitched Walmart on our American-made, union-manufactured retractable badge reels. And as of March of next year, Walmart will be carrying all over the country badge reels made in downtown Carnation. All of this is by way of saying, I actually understand something about how businesses and economics really work. I care a great deal about building an economy in which all of you will be able to get good jobs when you're done with school. And all of the people who have never run a business but assert that they somehow magically know how it works, they have no idea. When people talk about things like the minimum wage, I'm for increasing the minimum wage. I actually already pay every single one of my workers more than the $13.50 an hour that the state minimum wage will hopefully be raised to after the initiative that passes. Do you know why I want the minimum wage to go up? Because when workers have more money, businesses have more customers. If you do well, the economy as a whole will do well. And people who tell you otherwise don't know what they're talking about. I think we need people who actually understand how businesses and economies work in Olympia, setting the policies for this state so that we build a state where you can thrive. Thank you.